Imagine it's 1968. You're Jimi Hendrix, and you're so good at playing the guitar that one day some chick comes up to you and says, "Oi, Jimmy, you're so great at playing the guitar, mate. May I make a plaster copy of your cock?" And Jimmy, being ever the gentleman, says, "Oi, thank you very much for the compliment, mate. Of course you could take a copy of my cock." Excuse the reenactment. I wasn't there, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. Anyway, this is the tale of Jimmy's Jimmy and other famous dongs. Hello, my name is Rudy. Welcome to the channel. I like to talk about music, mostly rock and metal, and sometimes that means talking about musicians' dongs because they like to use it. Like a lot. Anyway, subscribe if you'd like. I'd like to get up to 1 billion subscribers. Not 1 million, but 1 billion, so pass the word. The 60s. The youth of that generation were departing from their parents' ideals. They protested war through their art, like music, paintings, sculpting, writing. You get the point. People no longer wanted war. The idea that love would triumph over evil was becoming more prevalent in their society. And then love turned into free love. And then free love turned into straight up just fucking in the streets. Now, although groupies had been around for a while, by the mid-60s, you couldn't go to a show where there wasn't a group of girls waiting around backstage in a back door somewhere, waiting to meet the musicians. And so the musicians can meet them. M-E-A-T. Isn't that right, David? Now, depending on who they slept with, they were usually celebrated by their peers. After a couple of shows in Chicago, Jimmy and the boys headed back to their hotel room. Enter Cynthia, the Plaster Caster, and the other Plaster Casters. Now, Cynthia and her friend, they followed the limousine of Jimi Hendrix and the band, and were the first groupies to arrive at the hotel and meet Jimi Hendrix. Now, they introduced themselves to Jimmy and the band and kind of explained what they do or were gonna attempt to do. Jimmy was excited by the idea and invited the girls up to his room. She explained the process and proceeded to make a mold out of Jimmy's penis. What a swell fellow Jimmy must have been. I mean, here are a couple of young strangers literally asking him to stick his hardened dick into some concoction, and he happily obliged. Since this was one of her first molds on anybody, let alone Jimi fucking Hendrix, she didn't know that she should have lubricated his pubes, and thus they got stuck inside the mold as it hardened. But he was a gentleman and was not mad as she pulled out his pubes one by one from the mold. So I bet he's in heaven now. Just reliving that memory over and over. I bet once that thing solidified, it gave the term hard rock a whole new meaning. Now, throughout the years, she's given several interviews in which she says either he's the biggest or one of the biggest. But either way, if you ever see that thing, it was obvious that Jimmy had a
Magnum Dong.
Thanks, Frank. That same night, she even made a mold out of the bass player's junk. Although with his, it began to soften up inside of the mold. So it kind of looks like a small rattlesnake getting ready to attack. She said that they ended up banging that night, they being Noel Redding and Cynthia, Plaster Caster. So I don't know if this was before or after the whole molding, but if it was after, I mean, we'll give the guy a break. Now, that was the first of a few famous musicians that she's molded. I mean, she has quite the list. I mean, from Jimi Hendrix to Eric Burdon of the Animals. Although with Eric Burdon, the mold didn't take, which is pretty sad. I mean, not that I give a shit, but I do like him as a singer. As a matter of fact, he's my favorite singer from the 60s. He was just such a badass. But that's a different story. When she met Frank Zappa, he thought it was a great art form and encouraged her to find more musicians to make molds out of, although he didn't participate. She became so famous for her work that there was even a couple of songs written about her. The most famous probably being Plaster Caster by Kiss, which was written by Gene Simmons. The song was on the Love Gun album, which begs the question, were they thinking of dongs throughout that whole writing process? I also find it a bit weird that Gene Simmons didn't participate, knowing how much of a horn dog he was back in the day, but he didn't. If you are interested in learning a bit more about Cynthia and the Plaster Casters, there's a whole documentary called Plaster Caster, if you want to check it out. Now, to this day, she's still making molds, and she's even started making molds out of boobies, which is kind of cool, in my opinion. Bless her. I mean, God broke the mold when he made her, but she certainly didn't. You know what I'm saying? And that's a fact, not a fallacy. But anyway, that's that. If you haven't heard about this story, let me know. If you've heard of other stories, I want to know. What did you think? Please let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, share the video, whatever you want. Peace.